According to Zach's chief equity strategist and economist, John Blank, Europe is churning in a profound geopolitical way. He's with me now to explain further. John, what does this mean exactly?
Terry, for the last 70 years, Europe has been held together by, first of all, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and our presence in Europe, and our rebuilding of Europe. And then after that rebuilding, the European Community, the EC, and now the Eurozone, which is a currency zone, and the free trade blocks and mobility blocks that center on that concept, which have over time been spreading east into including more Eastern European countries, as has NATO. So for 70 years, the United States has been central to the security and development of Europe. Now, in the last year or two, we've got Brexit, which means the English have finally broken away from the Eurozone. They were never part of it in the first place, but they were part of the trade part of it. So the basic thing that's happening here is Europe is facing fractures and conflict with us, the key treaty partner, and they have to think of themselves as an entity in a post-World War II framework for the first time in 70 years. So there's a big meeting here, the G20 meeting here at the end of this month in a few days. And this is going to be where Macron sits down with Biden and everybody else and starts to work on what Europe's contribution will be to all these organizations, what role the United States will play with Europe, and how Europe wants to handle all these things. So it is a time of profound geopolitical change for Europe.
Sounds like it's all based on current events. If that's the case, then who do you feel is most likely to lead the global dialogue for Europe?
Yeah, let's get into this because we're Americans, Terry. First of all, Macron is the senior most leader of Europe. He's been on board as his country's leader for the longest period of time, but he's actually fairly young. We have a German election. They have yet to come up with a coalition in Germany. Merkel, who was around for 16 years, is now gone. It will take a few months for Germany to put together a coalition and announce a prime minister. But so the third candidate here is good old-fashioned Mario Draghi, who was the ECB head of the European Central Bank for many years, had actually somewhat retired and then was brought back to solidify the Italian politics, become its prime minister. So the third point here is actually getting to something very interesting, which is Mario Draghi and Italy, which is, the story of Rome, the story of the Renaissance, the story of Marco Polo, is now gaining sustenance, relevance for this dialogue on which way Europe's looking, because the point of Italy versus NATO is in the days when the Romans and the Renaissance and the Marco Polo stories played out for Europe, it was not just across the Atlantic that Europe looked. It looked south across the Mediterranean, and it looked all the way east through all the little kingdoms and all the places that had come in from that area. So this is the story of why you might find out that Europe and Italy, and a lot of the stories you read about in history, are going to find new relevance.
Yeah, you brought up Marco Polo's home city in a commentary that you wrote recently on this. So is Italy a primary factor here?
Yeah, well, Marco Polo came out of Venice. And if you ever visit Venice, you're always fascinated with Venice. You think, wow, what happened to Venice? Well, in the days that Venice was super popular and all that wealth was created, when there was camel trains and people heading east to the Silk Road and further into China and to Persia and India and coming back with goods. And this made Italy, from the Renaissance to the Venetian period, quite a different place. And you got to remember, there was a part of Rome in Istanbul that hung in there till the 1600s. So always Rome had much more Easternward-looking presence than most people understand. And that's what brings the Marco Polo's home city back to play. The other thing to think about is, what is the new Venice in the new world? It truly might be Dubai. Dubai might begin to play that role in the modern world that Venice used to play.
So what impact is this entire story going to have on the global economy going forward?
Well, what's going to happen here, Terry, is you and I, at our age, have become all too complacent with the kind of World War II, NATO, transatlantic alliance picture of dominance in the global economy. And what will happen here over time is Europe is going to become a very different, multi-centered place where Russia plays a role, where all the Asian and Persian countries play a role, big rail lines coming in, and even the Mediterranean starts to matter to Europe again. And this is something that will feel very uncomfortable for a lot of people when the world is actually far, far more complex and with far deeper roots than we've played this handout in a much more simplistic way for the last 70 years.
Is this even more concerning than published reports I'm seeing now that China may be headed for a deeper slowdown than originally anticipated, especially with their energy crisis?
Well, that's more current. I mean, in the next few months and years, we might find China be more of a headline story than all the stuff I'm talking about. I'm talking about a much longer term geopolitical event. China's slowdown, the Evergrande story, is probably more relevant and more current.
Then we have the supply chain issues that are slowing down the global economy, right? They're going to slow down the global economy even further?
This is an issue that we need to bring into the play. Yeah, again, on a short-term basis for the next year until these supply chain issues get resolved through the market forces that are playing out here, you have to actually imagine that there will be some small cuts to growth that take place, or that people through the central banking channels begin to get much more concerned about inflation and start raising rates. So the basic issue with supply chain issues is it's a novelty for a lot of economists and central banks right now. But as 2022 goes on, this will be another news source that will dominate your thinking and probably play a role in the stock market. Having said that, I would not get bearish about this because obviously the market's going up right now. A lot of these supply chain issues have to do with strong goods demand, and that's good for most of these big companies.
All right. A full fall Zacks rank system recently showed 6 strong sectors that your research uncovered. Let's look at stocks in the top 3. Applied Materials in Infotech, Alcoa in the Industrial Group, and BRT Apartments Corporation in Financials.
Yeah, Terry, let's talk AMAT. AMAT's a very popular stock ticker, large cap stock that supplies the semiconductor fabricators with a lot of materials. Obviously, with semiconductor supply shortage, the back end of the value chain is getting a lot of attention from investors. So you got to like AMAT. It's been on our list and in our top industry sector look for many, many months, if not years. So the point here is watch the chart with AMAT because you want to buy it only on a pullback. Alcoa, ticker AA. This stock is big because of their ability to produce clean aluminum out of clean plants and supplant the Chinese aluminum production. So the stock's been on a big roll. It's been taking a little bit of a pullback in the last few days, but price targets are up in the $50s to $60 range. They're in the high 40s right now. So if you want to play a little momentum stock right now for another $10 a share, Alcoa is your name. The third one I point out is BRT Apartments, ticker BRT. This name I had never heard of. I'm sure you never heard of it. But this is the story of people looking for apartments in major cities and getting into higher rents. That's playing out through BRT Apartments. So take a look at that name. It's just a name I want to put on people's radar screen.
Chief equity strategist and economist John Blank on Europe and the global economy. With John, I'm Terry Ruffalo. Something here you may want to check out, a just-released report, 5 stocks set to double, where 4 Zacks experts each announced their single favorite pick with potential to gain 100% and more in the months ahead. You can download that private special report that names these stocks and spotlights why their upside is so exceptional when you go to Zacks.com/promo.
This material is being provided for informational purposes only, and nothing herein constitutes investment, legal, accounting, or tax advice, or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold a security. Do not act or rely upon the information and advice given in this podcast without seeking the services of competent and professional legal, tax, or accounting counsel. Publication and distribution of this podcast is not intended to create, and the information contained herein does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. No recommendation or advice is being given as to whether any investment or strategy is suitable for a particular investor. It should not be assumed that any investments in securities, companies, sectors, or markets identified and described were or will be profitable. All information is current as of the date herein and is subject to change without notice. Any views or opinions expressed may not reflect those of Zacks Investment Research as a whole.